Hey, welcome to this edition of The Golden Rule, a program that's intended to help people understand how God works and how God operates in people's lives. I don't have a guest today, I'm my own guest, and I want to do something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I've had people ask me from time to time, how is it that you get to do this or this or this? And my answer is the title to Woody Clark's book, Don't Blame Me. I didn't do it, God did. I can't take credit for any of the things that have happened in my life of a spiritual nature. It's all been directed by God. And many people say, well, how does God direct you? And that's the question I want to address today. I want to start by reading to you 1 Chronicles 4, verse 10, commonly known as the prayer of Jabez. And Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, "Oh, that you would bless me indeed, and enlarge my coast, and that your hand might be with me, and that you'd keep me from evil, that it may not grieve me." And God granted him his request. So I cut that prayer out. I wrote that prayer out and stuck it on my kitchen window and on my bathroom window, and I read it quite frequently. And there's power in the Word of God. So I'm just going to go back to Ed Folden here in Detroit Lakes. He was a seniors pastor at Community Alliance Church 20 plus years ago, and I became connected with him, and he coined the phrase Detroit Lakes becoming a beacon of righteousness. And when Ed went on to be with the Lord, I just picked up on that mantra and decided to follow through on it. And so my whole purpose for existence here in Detroit Lakes is to see this community become a God-honoring community. And I don't know how to do that. But God does. And He comes up with the most innovative and interesting ways. So the first thing that happened was I'd read a book, many years ago, written by a friend of mine named Wesley Smith, and the title of it was Young Warriors. And in this book, he talked about a church that he knew of in Switzerland that had decided to do they didn't call it a Bible reading marathon, but they read through the Bible in 84 nonstop hours, 24/7, they read. And they would have people come in every hour. They'd have a 5-minute break, and then people would come and go as they wished. And they did this for the entire, from Genesis to Revelation. And they were amazed by the fact that there was no preaching, no other exhortation of any kind, just straight reading the Bible. And as a result, people became believers, marriages were healed, sicknesses were healed, people were delivered and saved, and all kinds of things just by reading the Bible. And I thought, man, is that ever neat? And in the back of my mind, I thought, someday I'd like to see that happen. And I didn't know when or how to do any of it. But in 2015, Detroit Lakes, we had our first Bible reading marathon. After having heard that this was a regular event at the state capitol every year at the National Day of Prayer, they would read the Bible through on the Capitol steps a week before the Day of Prayer. And then other cities and other states were doing the same thing. So I figured, well, if they're doing it, what's stopping us from doing it? And the only thing stopping anybody from doing it was nobody was doing it. And so I figured, well, I don't know how, but let's get on with it. And so the first year, we had over 300 people read for 15 minutes, back to back. And we didn't do round the clock. We did 14-hour days. We started at 6 a.m. and we went till 8 p.m. in the evening. And we just had people sitting at a table, at a microphone, reading the Bible. No audience, no big get-togethers of any kind, but we just read the Bible through. Well, we did that. And then a couple of years later, I thought, why limit it to 300 people? Why read 15 minutes? Why not cut it down and get more people in? So we had 500 people reading through the Bible that next year, 10 minutes each. And it was great. And it went on for a while, and we did that. And that was, like I said, 2015 we started. So this year will be our 9th consecutive year. We haven't missed a year. But I decided to revise the format because I'm thinking to myself, okay, who's hearing this? God is hearing this. Well, was that the purpose of it in the first place? Yes. The purpose of it in the first place was to let God know that we honor His Word. There was no audience. There was no people sitting back there and on their lawn chairs listening. Nobody was listening. And so I thought, I wonder if we can modify this so we might get a little bit more public attention. And so what we started doing, and we've been doing for the past several years now, is to read the Bible concurrently rather than consecutively. And so what we're doing is, on a given Saturday, and I think it's going to be July 29th this year, or whatever that Saturday is in there, we are going to have 80, 90, 100, 150, 200, 300 people in the park, all reading the Bible out loud, not screaming out loud, not microphones out loud, sitting in a chair with a couple other folks, reading to one another. And the park is going to be full of people just reading the Bible. And so anyway, that's how that event got started, for those of you who are familiar with it. The next one that came up was I had seen years ago. Did you ever hear these Burma Shave signs? Raina, did you ever hear the Burma Shave signs? You never did. Well, they used to have little limericks in signs, 2 or 3 or 4 in a row along the streets, advertising Burma Shave, but it was cute little limericky type stuff. And I thought, I wonder if you could do that with the Bible. And so I decided, why not? And so, boy, I wasn't going to get into all this detail, but I'm going to, because I think it's so interesting, and it'll help you to understand how God uses people. He'll use anybody. I'm nothing special. I've done some special things. I've done some things that have got some publicity, but I didn't do it, and it wasn't my intention to do it in a public way. But what happened was, I had these limerick things going through my head for years. And then one day I thought, why not take the Lord's Prayer and break it up into 10 signs and display them along a highway? But how do you do that? How do you get 10 neighbors to agree to have a sign in their front yards about Jesus, about God? That's a challenge in itself. Well, here's how it happened. My wife died on June 14th, 2016. And the following year, I had the idea for this vision. So, no, it was right after she died. That's right. And so I went to every neighbor. That's a whole nother thing. I'd been prayer walking my neighborhood from the American Legion Road to County Road 6. That was my turf. That was my church. And I'd drive my bicycle back and forth, and I'd just pray, God bless that house, God bless that house. I didn't know a single soul in any of these houses. I'm just saying, God bless them. Well, now I need their permission to put up signs. And so what I did was, I went to each house, started right down there and worked my way back. And I introduced myself. I said, hi, I'm Barry Schroeder. And they said, so what? I said, well, I got a problem I wonder if you can help me with. Problem? What kind of problem you talking about? I said, well, a couple of weeks ago, my wife died. Well, when you say that, all of a sudden you get the sympathy, oh, we're so sorry. Oh, our condolences and all that kind of stuff. And I said, thank you. I appreciate that, but that's not my problem. Well, what is your problem? I said, before she died, she asked me to plant a garden, and I did. And now that garden is producing bountifully, and I've got vegetables coming out of my ears. Could you use some fresh garden cucumbers or string beans or corn or tomatoes or whatever? And they said, oh, yeah, that'd be very nice. And so as a result of that, I knew every neighbor's name, and I'd had a face-to-face visit with them. So now when I ride by on my bike, it's not just God bless so-and-so, I can say their name, and they'll wave to me, and I say hi. Well, now I got this idea about this Bible reading marathon, right? So at least I have a one-on-one name relationship with these folks. So then I start going to door. I say, I've got an idea. I don't know how to do it, but would you be willing to allow me to put a sign in your front yard that's part of the Lord's Prayer? We'll have 10 of them down the block, and it'll be kind of neat. So I get 10 people to say yes. And so that's how the prayer signs began. But then the next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call from the newspaper here in Detroit Lakes wanting to do an article on the signs. And I say, what's that all about? They said, well, a lady came into our office and she told us how that morning she had gotten up and she had a need in her life which was severe. And so she prayed, God, if you're going to be with me in this situation, please give me a sign. And as she drove down Westlake Drive, she saw 10 signs. So she went to the newspaper. She says, you've got to do an article on those signs. So they came to me. I didn't initiate it. They came to me, ended up to be a front page article about the signs with a color picture. Well, then within a very short period of time, I get a phone call from WDAY TV in Fargo. I didn't know that WDAY owned our local newspaper, but apparently somebody over there had read the article, and they said, can we come and do an interview with you for our 6 o'clock news tonight? I said, sure. So they came and they interviewed not only me, but several of the neighbors. And they came and sat on my deck, and they were filming for a half an hour. And they said, do you have a... And I told them about my wife. They knew my wife had died. They said, would she have approved of this? I said, oh, you better believe it. So I said, do you have a picture of her? And so I said, yeah, there's a picture of her on the dining room, in the bathroom, in the kitchen on the island. And I didn't realize it, but when they put this thing on the news, I didn't even see it when it came on, but somebody called me from Jamestown, North Dakota, a friend I hadn't seen in 30 years. He says, Barry, I just saw you on television, and I'm sorry about Sharon. I didn't even know Sharon had died. So anyway, that's how this whole thing got publicized here in Detroit Lakes. And as a result of that news report on WDAY, one man drove from Fargo just to see the signs. And then I started hearing other reports. A man and his wife were driving by on a tandem bicycle, and they stopped at every sign and sang that particular verse. And another time, a couple driving by in the car, the woman had seen the sign, the man had not, and he said, what's that? And she says, oh, that's the Lord's Prayer. He pulled over, parked his car, took his wife by the hand, and prayed with her for the first time in their lives that he and his wife had ever prayed together. But the signs made such an impact on him. So when we're talking about making Detroit Lakes become a beacon of righteousness, that's just one example of how it can happen. And then I was at a conference in California, and I was visiting with a man. I was telling him about this whole sign thing. Next thing I know, a couple of weeks later, I get a call from him. He says, Barry, can we do an article on your signs in our internationally circulated newsletter? And we're going to feature 3 towns that are making an impact for God. Would you allow us to include Detroit Lakes as one of these signs? So do you understand what I'm saying? I didn't do any of this. God did it, and he wants to use you. Yes, you. You say, well, I'm a nobody. Well, welcome to the club. We're all nobodies, but God is looking for people who will say, Lord, would you please use me? And if you'll be willing to pray that prayer, Jabez, 1 Chronicles 4:10, O Lord, that you'd bless me indeed and enlarge my coast, that your hand might be with me and that you'd keep me from evil, that it might not grieve me. If you'll pray that prayer every day, we're going to continue this because I'm not done. Thanks for listening, and tune in again next time. God bless you.